She was worth $3 billion, and she was walking straight toward him.
Mhm.
Logan Whitaker had been standing alone near the bar for 20 minutes, nursing a drink he didn't really want, counting the minutes until he could drive home to his daughter without seeming rude. He was nobody at this wedding. A former friend of the groom, a single father with a tech support job, and a cat that hated him. The kind of man women like her didn't notice, but she had noticed him. And nothing in Logan Whitaker's carefully ordinary life would ever be the same again. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you've been with us before, you already know what's coming. Stories that reach all the way into your chest and don't let go. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss what we put out next. Give this video a like if you're already feeling something, and drop a comment below telling us your city and country. I want to see is exactly how far this story travels. Now settle in. This one is going to take a while, and it is absolutely worth it. The wedding was held at the Hendricks estate, which was the kind of venue that existed to make ordinary people feel vaguely embarrassed about their ordinary lives. It sat 20 miles outside Eugene, on a property that had once been a working farm, and had since been converted into a landscape of white tents, manicured hedgerows, and string lights arranged so deliberately that they managed to look accidental. Caterers moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. A band played something jazzy and tasteful near the dance floor. Everything smelled like cut flowers and expensive candles. Logan had dressed carefully for this, which meant he'd stood in front of his closet for 15 minutes before choosing the dark charcoal suit he'd bought for his cousin's wedding 4 years ago. Still fit, mostly. He'd gained a little around the middle, not much, but enough that the jacket button required a decision every time he considered fastening it. He left it open. The drive from his apartment had taken 45 minutes. He'd arranged for Haley to spend the night at his mother's house, which Haley loved because his mother let her stay up past 9 and watch nature documentaries and eat cereal for dinner without any guilt attached. Logan had kissed her forehead twice before leaving, told her he'd call to say goodnight, and then sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. He almost hadn't come. Marcus Everett had been a close friend once back in college, before Logan's life took the turn it took. They'd stayed in loose contact afterward, the kind of contact that lived mostly in occasional texts and birthday acknowledgments on social media. But Marcus had insisted Logan come to the wedding. "You need to get out of that apartment," he'd said. And Logan had recognized the specific tone people used when they were worried about you, but didn't want to say so directly. So he'd come. He was here. He was standing near the bar with a glass of white wine he hadn't asked for and wouldn't finish, watching people he didn't know talk to each other with the easy confidence of people accustomed to rooms like this. Logan Whitaker was 32 years old. He had a 7-year-old daughter named Haley, who was currently watching the documentary about deep-sea creatures at his mother's house. He worked a tech support job at a mid-sized company outside Eugene, handling calls from people who couldn't figure out why their software wasn't working and occasionally couldn't figure out why their computers were plugged into the wrong outlet. Pay was consistent. The work was numbing in a way he'd learned to call stable. He drove a 2019 Civic with a crack in the passenger side mirror that he'd been meaning to get fixed for 8 months. This was his life. He had made peace with it mostly. The circumstances that had delivered him here to this particular version of a life were not complicated. He had been 24 when Haley was born. Her mother, Jess, had been 23. They had been dating for a year when the pregnancy happened, and they had tried, with genuine effort and real affection, to build something together afterward. It hadn't worked, not because of any explosion or betrayal, but because they were two young people who'd been pushed into a shape neither of them had chosen, and eventually the seams gave. Jess had moved to Seattle when Haley was 3. She called regularly. She visited for birthdays and holidays. She was not a bad person. They had simply been incompatible in ways that parenthood had illuminated rather than solved. Logan had stayed in Eugene because his mother was there and because uprooting a toddler had seemed cruel. He dropped out of college when Haley arrived, 2 semesters from finishing his communications degree, and taken the first job that paid enough to cover rent and daycare. That had been tech support. He was still there. He did not regret Haley. He wanted to be clear about that, even in his own internal accounting. Haley was 7 years old, and she could already explain the difference between warm-blooded and cold-blooded animals. And she had recently informed him with complete seriousness that octopuses were smarter than most people gave them credit for, and she made him laugh at least once every single day. She was the best thing in his life. He was certain of this. But there were moments, usually late at night, after she was asleep, and the apartment was quiet when Logan felt the weight of everything he had set aside. Not with bitterness, just with a kind of dull, persistent awareness that he had stopped being anything other than a father. That the man he had imagined becoming at 21 curious, ambitious, going somewhere, had slowly been replaced by a man who was responsible and steady and invisible. He was thinking something loosely along these lines when he saw her. She was standing near the edge of the dance floor, listening to something a silver-haired man in a tuxedo was saying. She wore a dark green dress, not flashy, but the kind of garment that had been made with real attention, the kind of green that shifted slightly depending on the light. She was probably 30, maybe slightly younger or older. Dark hair pulled up with a few deliberate pieces left loose around her face. She had the posture of someone who had spent years in rooms full of powerful people and had stopped being impressed by any of it. Logan looked at her the way a person looks at something that doesn't belong to them. Briefly, without expectation, and then away. He reached for his wine glass and drained the last of it. And then he became aware, in that particular way a person becomes aware, when the social geometry of a room is shifting, that someone was moving toward him. He turned. She was crossing the space between them with the unhurried confidence of someone who had decided something and was simply executing the decision. She wasn't looking anywhere else. She was looking at him. Logan had enough time to wonder, with genuine bewilderment, whether she was heading for someone standing behind him. He almost turned to check. He didn't. She stopped in front of him. "I've been watching you stand by yourself for the last 15 minutes, she said. "That's either very peaceful or very sad, and I can't quite tell which." Her voice was composed. Not the performance of composure, the real thing, the kind that came from having learned it the hard way. Logan opened his mouth, closed it, then, a little bit of both, probably. Something shifted in her expression, not a full smile. More like the movement before a smile, the decision being made. "I'm Scarlett," she said. "Logan, do you want to dance, Logan?" He looked at the dance floor, where several couples were moving together to something slow and forgettable. "I should warn you," he said. "I'm not a good dancer." "I'm not asking because I need a good dancer," she said. "I'm asking because I've been standing in this room for 2 hours, making conversation about investment returns, and I need to talk to a real person for 5 minutes." He considered this. "That's an honest reason," he said. "I'm an honest person." They walked to the dance floor together. Logan placed his hand carefully at her waist, the way a man does when he's being deliberate about being respectful and hopes it shows. She didn't seem to mind. She settled into the rhythm easily, adjusting slightly when he stepped wrong the first time, not making anything of it. "So which is it for you?" she asked. "Peaceful or sad?" "Probably sad, if I'm being honest," he said. "I almost didn't come tonight. But someone told me I needed to get out of my apartment, and they were probably right." "Who told you that?" "The groom, Marcus. We went to college together." "You don't seem like you and Marcus run in the same circles." It wasn't unkind, just observational. "We don't anymore," Logan said. "We did once. Before I dropped out. What happened?" He looked at her. People usually didn't ask that. They said, "Oh," with a particular kind of polite sympathy that closed the subject. "I had a daughter," he said. "She was unexpected. Her mother and it didn't work out. So I stayed in Eugene and took the first job that covered the bills." "How old is she?" "7. Her name's Haley." He paused. "She's currently watching a documentary about deep-sea fish at my mother's house and is probably never going to sleep." Scarlett made a sound that was almost a laugh. "That sounds like a very specific and accurate worry." "It's extremely specific and extremely accurate." They turned slowly at the edge of the floor. Logan noticed that she danced the way she walked, without effort, without performance, just the simple act of moving through space, someone who had made peace with where her body was. "What about you?" he asked. "Are you peaceful or sad?" She was quiet for a moment. He had the sense she was deciding how honest to be. "Lonely," she said finally, which is different from sad. Sad is a feeling. Lonely is more of a condition. "Yeah," Logan said. "I know that one. People look at my life and assume there's nothing missing." It's a reasonable assumption. On paper, paper lies a lot. It really does. The song shifted to something slightly faster, but neither of them adjusted. They kept the same pace, which meant they were now moving slower than the music, and somehow that seemed fine. "I used to think about who I'd be by 32, Logan said. He wasn't sure why he was saying it. Something about her made the words come more easily than they usually did. "I had this whole picture, not anything dramatic, just more. More of myself. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person and started just being a function. Dad, employee, bill payer. And I'm not complaining, I want to be clear. I love my daughter more than anything. But I look at guys I went to college with, and I think, when did I stop being someone who wants things?" Scarlett was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully categorize. That's a very honest thing to say to a stranger, she said. You asked? I did. You said you were an honest person. I figured you could handle an honest answer. The song ended. Stepped apart. Around them, the crowd applauded lightly, the way crowds do at weddings when music stops. Walk with me for a minute, Scarlett said. They moved through the tent and out onto a stone terrace that overlooked the dark field beyond the property. String lights didn't reach out here. It was quieter. The air had that particular June chill that comes off Oregon soil after sundown. They stood at the railing, not quite next to each other, but close enough that their arms almost touched. Can I tell you something? Scarlett said. Yeah. Every relationship I've been in, every single one has been contaminated by what I do, by what people think I can give them, or what they think I expect. It stops being about two people almost immediately and turns into something else. She paused. I can't tell you the last time I had a conversation with someone who wasn't calculating something while we were talking. Logan turned to look at her. What are you calculating right now? She met his eyes. I'm calculating whether you're actually as direct as you seem, or whether it's a strategy. It's not a strategy. I'm just a tired 32-year-old who's been standing near a bar for an hour and has to drive home to pick up his daughter in the morning. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, I think I like you, Logan. He didn't know what to do with that. He laughed, not a polished laugh, a real one, slightly startled and slightly ungraceful. I don't even know what you do, he said. I work in finance. Investments. Is it boring? She considered it, parts of it. The parts where you have to explain risk tolerance to men who think explaining things to women is a personal indulgence. Those parts are boring and also infuriating. That sounds exhausting. You have no idea. They stayed on the terrace for another 20 minutes. Logan told her about Haley's current obsession with deep-sea creatures and how she demanded he get a library card specifically so she could take out books about anglerfish. Scarlett told him about a meeting she'd had the previous week where a senior partner had interrupted her 4 times before she'd simply stopped speaking mid-sentence and waited until the room had gone so uncomfortable that he'd finally shut up. Logan asked if it had worked. She said it had worked better than anything she'd tried before. When they went back inside, the party was winding down. Can I have your number? Scarlett asked. Just like that. Direct, unhesitating. Logan looked at her for a moment. Sure, he said. And they exchanged phones and typed in their numbers like two people who were both pretending this was a casual thing, which it probably was. Probably. They said goodbye at the entrance to the main tent. Marcus found Logan on his way out and gave him a look, raised eyebrows, a grin held just below the surface. Was that Scarlett Pembroke you were talking to for half the night? That was Scarlett, Logan said. She works in finance. Marcus stared at him. Logan, he said slowly, Scarlett Pembroke is finance. She's worth I don't even know, multiple billions. She's like one of the most powerful women in American investing. She's been on the cover of, I'm sorry, what? Multiple billions, man. She founded her own firm at 26. Logan was already outside, the cool air hitting his face, thinking about the woman in the dark green dress who had told him she was lonely and asked if she could have his number. He drove home replaying the terrace conversation in his mind. The way she'd said lonely, like it was something she'd finally admitted after a long time. The way she'd asked about Haley like it mattered, like the answer was interesting rather than complicated. The way she'd laughed, not performed laughter. Real laughter, brief and slightly surprised, like she'd done it before she decided whether or not she meant to. He picked up Haley from his mother's house the next morning. Haley had, predictably, not slept until almost midnight and was now walking with the loose, heavy energy of a child running on enthusiasm and not enough hours. She told him about the anglerfish. She told him the anglerfish was misunderstood. Logan said he was beginning to agree. He did not tell her about Scarlett. He did not tell anyone about Scarlett. He half expected never to hear from her again. A billionaire with a crowded calendar and a sophisticated life, why would she follow up on a conversation with a man who told her about grocery bills and a cat that knocked things off countertops? It was the kind of night terrace conversation that was meaningful in the moment and disappeared by morning. He was certain of this. He was wrong. 3 days later, at 6:47 on a Tuesday evening, while Logan was standing in his kitchen trying to determine whether the pasta had been boiling long enough and whether Haley had done her spelling words yet, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He almost didn't open it. This is Scarlett. From the wedding. I realize it took me 3 days to text, which either seems calculated or uncertain. Uncertain, for what it's worth. I was wondering if you wanted to talk again sometime. Logan read it twice. Then he turned off the burner under the pasta, walked to the kitchen table, and sat down. Pasta was slightly overcooked. He didn't care. He typed back, "It doesn't seem calculated. And yeah, I'd like that." He put the phone face down on the table and looked at the ceiling for a moment. In the other room, Haley was talking to the cat about anglerfish. Outside, Eugene was settling into evening, and something Logan Whitaker had stopped expecting something shapeless and certain and entirely new had quietly begun. The first text led to a second. The second led to a phone call that Logan had not planned for and almost declined because it came in at 8:15 on a Wednesday, and he was trying to get Haley through her bath routine, which involved a recurring negotiation about whether the water temperature was acceptable and whether the cat was allowed in the bathroom during the process. He stepped into the hallway and answered anyway. "Bad time?" Scarlett said. "My daughter is arguing with me about the bath water. She says lukewarm is a conspiracy against children." Pause. "Then she's not entirely wrong." Logan laughed despite himself. In the bathroom, Haley called his name with the particular urgency of a child who has decided that a 2-second delay is abandonment. He told Scarlett he'd call her back in 20 minutes. She said she'd be up. He went back to the bathroom and negotiated the water temperature down from scalding to something reasonable. Got Haley through her bath, read her 2 chapters of a book about a girl who befriended a crow, waited until her breathing slowed into something deeper and more even, and then sat on the edge of his own bed and called Scarlett back. It was past 9. He expected to get voicemail. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me about the cat," she said, like they were continuing a conversation rather than starting one. The cat's name is Wallace. He was supposed to be Haley's responsibility, and he has not, in 2 years of cohabitation, acknowledged that she exists. He has decided that he belongs to me, and I have no say in it. "What kind of cat?" The ungrateful kind tabby. "Orange." Very loud opinions about dinner timing. "I've never had a pet," Scarlett said. Something shifted in her voice. "My schedule, it didn't seem fair." "What does your schedule actually look like?" Another pause. He was learning already that her pauses were not hesitation. They were the sound of her deciding how much to give. "Today I was in meetings from 7:30 in the morning until 5. Then I had a call with a portfolio company in Zurich that went until 7. Then I came home, ordered food I barely ate, and sat in my apartment thinking I should be reviewing a risk assessment report I've been putting off for 3 days. She stopped. "Then I thought about calling you instead. And did you review the report?" "No." "Good," she laughed. It was the same laugh as the terrorist slightly surprised real. That call lasted an hour and 40 minutes. Logan did not plan it. He did not go in with a strategy or any particular version of himself he was trying to present. He was tired from a full day of calls, 3 customers who couldn't access their accounts, one who had been working from a laptop with a cracked screen for 6 months and had somehow never mentioned this was relevant. And he talked to Scarlett the way he might talk to someone he'd known for years, which was to say without any of the performance that talking to a near stranger usually required. She told him about a board meeting that had gone sideways when 2 senior investors had a disagreement that had technically been about fund allocation and was actually about who had been right 2 years ago about an acquisition that had since gone badly. She described it with a dry, contained irritation that told him she'd been in the room managing it. He asked if she'd had to referee. She said she'd had to pretend not to be refereeing, which was worse because it required significantly more patience. He told her about a call from that afternoon, a customer, mid-50s, who'd spent 20 minutes insisting the problem was the software. Before Logan had quietly asked what color the warning light on the router was doing, at which point it emerged the router had been unplugged for 2 days. The customer had been briefly furious and then started laughing. Logan had started laughing too, which was technically unprofessional and also the only honest response to the situation. Scarlett said, "You laughed at a customer?" Gently, sympathetically. He was laughing first. "You could get in trouble for that." "Probably. But sometimes the job is just you're the only person some of these people talk to all day. Got to be a human being about it." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, that's a good way to think about it." The calls became regular. Not scheduled, nothing so formal but consistent, the way a habit forms without announcement. 3-4 nights a week. Sometimes shorter, 20 minutes, because one of them was genuinely exhausted and said so. Sometimes longer, and Logan would realize it was past 11, and he had a 6:30 alarm and feel only faintly guilty about it. Scarlett sent texts during the day too. Nothing extensive. Observations, mostly. A photo of a skyline from an airport she'd rather not be in. A news headline she found either ridiculous or alarming, and occasionally both. He'd send back a photo of Wallace sitting directly on whatever Logan was trying to read, or Haley's latest drawing, which had recently entered a phase of depicting deep-sea animals with what Haley called accuracy, but what Logan recognized as spectacular creative interpretation. Scarlett always responded to the Haley drawings. He noticed that. About 3 weeks after the wedding, Logan made the mistake of Googling her name. He wasn't sure what he'd expected. He'd known, from what Marcus told him, that she was significant. He had not understood the scale of significant. The first result was a profile piece in a major financial publication. From the previous year, he clicked it, read 4 paragraphs, and closed the tab. The 4th paragraph mentioned a figure, a number attached to the word billion, and Logan set his phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment looking at the wall. He picked his phone up again and scrolled further. There were photos from charity events, industry conferences, a speaking engagement at what appeared to be a very serious summit of some kind. In every photograph, Scarlett wore the same expression as the one he'd seen when she'd crossed the room toward him at the wedding composed, unimpressed, slightly impatient with the formality of the occasion. She looked like someone doing a very competent job of being present in rooms she'd rather not be in. Logan read one more article, which described her as one of the most influential women in American finance, and used the phrase ruthless pragmatist in a way that seemed meant as a compliment, and then he put his phone down and stared at the ceiling of his apartment, which was 700 square feet and had a water stain near the window he'd been meaning to report to the landlord. When Scarlett called that night, he almost said something immediately. He spent the first 10 minutes of the conversation with it, sitting in his chest like an object he couldn't put down. Then he just said, "I looked you up a beat, I know. I figured you would. You could have told me I could have." She paused. "But you were talking to me like I was a person, Logan. I didn't want to ruin it before it started." He thought about the terrace. The way she'd said lonely, like it was a thing she'd been carrying for a long time. The way she'd asked about Haley with real curiosity. "It doesn't ruin it," he said. "It just stopped. Try it again. It explains some things." "What things?" "Why you said what you said, about every relationship being contaminated." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was careful. "I've had 3 serious relationships. In all 3, the money became the thing. Either they wanted access to it, or they felt diminished by it, or they resented it, or they decided they deserved it. There was no version where it was just irrelevant." Another pause. "With you for a few weeks, it was just irrelevant." "It's still irrelevant," Logan said. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not surprised. But it's not, it doesn't change what this is." "You don't know what this is yet," she said. "No," he agreed. "But I'm not running from it." They were both quiet for a moment. "Okay," Scarlett said, soft, like something was released. The first date, if it could be called that, and neither of them used the word at the time, happened on a Saturday in early July when Haley was with her mother in Seattle for the weekend. Scarlett suggested Eugene. Logan, who'd half assumed she would want to meet somewhere that matched her usual orbit, Portland at least, maybe further found himself slightly surprised and said so. "I've eaten in 4-star restaurants in 12 countries, Scarlett said. "Take me somewhere you actually like." He took her to a bookstore on 5th that also served coffee and had a used section in the back where the organization system appeared to be loosely thematic and entirely philosophical. It was Saturday morning and raining lightly, which was not an unusual condition for Oregon in July. And the stores smelled like old paper and slightly burnt espresso, and the particular warmth of a space that has been occupied by people who love books for several decades. Scarlett arrived in jeans and a gray sweater, her hair down, no visible indication of the billionaire who appeared in financial publications. She walked through the door and looked around at the mismatched armchairs and overstocked shelves and said, "Okay, this is a good place." "I used to come here in college," Logan said. "I'd spend 3 hours in the back and come out with books I couldn't technically afford." "Which section?" "American fiction, mostly. Some history." He paused. "You, economics, obviously. But also, strange as it sounds, poetry." He handed her a coffee he'd ordered at the counter while she was still taking off her jacket. Took it without ceremony, the way people do when they're comfortable, and then caught herself. "Thank you," she said. People don't usually just hand me coffee. Do they make you order it yourself on a silver tray?" "They usually have someone order it for me," which I hate. They spent 2 hours in the bookstore. Not talking constantly, that was the thing Logan found himself noticing. There were long stretches where they were both simply reading something they'd pulled off a shelf, standing in adjacent aisles, and the silence wasn't the anxious kind that required filling. Scarlett bought 6 books. She paid in cash, pulling it from a wallet that was visibly not a billionaire's wallet, just a plain leather bifold, and Logan decided not to think too hard about what that meant or didn't mean. After the bookstore, they walked to a taco place 3 blocks down that Logan had been going to since college and that had not appreciably changed in the intervening decade. Plastic chairs, laminate tables, a hand-painted menu on the wall. The food was extraordinary in the way that unpretentious food sometimes is the kind of cooking that doesn't ask you to be impressed. It just tastes like something was made with real attention. Scarlett ate 2 tacos and most of Logan's chips without asking and said they were the best tacos she'd had in recent memory. Better than 12 countries? Logan said. In 12 countries, someone is always watching me eat, she said. It changes the flavor. He understood what she meant. They talked differently in person than they did on the phone. On the phone, there was a kind of freedom that came from distance. You could say things into the air without having to watch someone's face receive them. In person, every word had weight, had consequence. Logan was more careful. Scarlett was too, he thought. But the carefulness was not the same as guardedness. It was more like attention, like they were both paying a different quality of attention to what was being said. He walked her back to her car in the early afternoon. The rain had stopped. The sidewalk was wet and caught the pale gray light in the way wet pavement does, which is one of the things Logan had always liked about Oregon without ever saying so. Car a rental, he noticed, not the kind of car a person of her means would normally drive. She turned to look at him. I had a really good time, she said. That's not something I say much. I could tell it's not something you say much. You looked slightly surprised by the tacos. I was. I didn't expect to like them that much. People underestimate unpretentious things. She looked at him for a moment. The thing in her expression was not easy to name. Then she said, same time next month, I can come back. Or I can drive to Portland, he said. I'm not. He stopped. Started over. I don't need you to come to me. I know you don't need me to, she said. That's sort of the point. The second date was in Portland at a museum exhibit that Scarlett suggested, and Logan would not have thought to suggest, but found himself genuinely absorbed by a collection of American photography from the 60s and 70s, working class and documentary, the kind of images that caught people in the middle of their actual lives without apology. They spent 90 minutes walking through it slowly, talking when something provoked them to, and not when it didn't. Scarlett stood for a long time in front of a large print, a woman in a diner, coffee cup near her face, looking out a rain-streaked window at something outside the frame. Her expression in the photograph was not sad. It was just distant, the specific kind of distant that means someone is somewhere else in their head while their body remains in the diner. That's me at most dinners, Scarlett said quietly. Which part? The coffee or the window? The window. She didn't look away from the photograph. Sitting somewhere that should feel like enough and thinking about everything that isn't there. Logan stood beside her. He looked at the photograph and then at her. What would need to be there? He asked. She turned from the print to look at him. Something in her face was very open, in a way that he recognized must not be a common occurrence. I don't know yet, she said, but I'm starting to think it's something like this. He wasn't entirely sure what she meant. He thought he understood it, but he didn't push. Some things needed their own room. They had dinner in Portland at a restaurant that was, by Logan's standards, significantly more expensive than his usual territory, but he'd looked it up beforehand and prepared himself and ordered without looking at the prices, because he'd decided looking at prices in front of her was its own kind of performance. He paid for himself. She didn't argue, but he could see she considered it. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know. I could have my... Scarlett, I know you could have. He picked up his water glass. But I wanted to. She was quiet for a moment. Then, most people just assume I'll cover it. Or they make a very elaborate show of offering, and then let me... I'm not most people. No, she said slowly, like the word was something she was confirming to herself. You're not. The third date did not go as well. It was August, a Saturday, and they'd planned to meet in Portland again, this time, just walking. No agenda, the loose kind of day that looks easy and requires more comfort between two people than either of them had acknowledged. Logan drove up. He had not slept well. Haley had been sick earlier in the week, and he'd spent 2 nights on the floor beside her bed, which his back had not forgiven him for, and he was quieter than usual, and the quietness gathered in him in ways he hadn't anticipated. They were walking along the waterfront when it came out. Not the way Logan would have wanted it to come out, not with clarity or control, but in the messy forward way that things come out when you've been holding them too long. I don't understand what this is, he said. He stopped walking. Scarlett stopped beside him. I understand what I feel. Don't understand your side of it. What you actually get out of this. Scarlett turned to look at him. Her expression was careful. What are you asking me, Logan? I'm asking whether you're... He stopped. Tried to find the honest shape of it. Whether this is something real or whether it's a kind of escape. Like, you're tired of your world and I'm interesting because I'm different. And at some point, the novelty wears off and you go back to... Stop, she said it quietly, but it had enough force that he stopped. She looked at him for a moment. He could see the decision being made in her face, the choosing of a particular response over others. Do you know what it costs me to be here right now? She said. Not in money. I mean, I have a board meeting in 2 days I'm not fully prepared for. I have 3 reports waiting for my attention. I have a senior partner who keeps questioning whether the new fund structure is viable and needs me to be available every time he panics. I have all of that. She held his gaze. And I am standing on a waterfront in Portland because you make me feel like a person, Logan. Not a CEO, not a fund manager, not a number, a person, she paused. I'm not doing this because you're a novelty. I'm doing this because you're the first man in 3 years who has never once tried to impress me or use me or perform for me. You talk to me like... She stopped, took a breath. You talk to me like I'm someone you're glad to know. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Logan looked at her. The waterfront was busy couples, joggers, a family with a stroller, and the ordinary world was moving around them as if nothing significant was happening. It was both unremarkable and strange. I'm sorry, he said. That came out. You don't have to apologize for being scared, she said. You have a daughter, a life that works. I understand why you're scared of what I represent. I'm not scared of what you represent. I'm scared that I'm starting to need this. He looked at her directly. I'm scared of what it means if this stops. She looked at him for a moment. And then she stepped forward and kissed him brief, not uncertain, just the very clear and simple statement of a thing that had been true for a while. When she pulled back, she said, It's not stopping. You don't know that. I know what I feel. She held his gaze. And I know that you just told me you need this, which is the first genuinely terrifying thing you've said to me, because it means I'm in the same place, and now we're both frightened together. Logan exhaled. That's one way to look at it. It's the accurate way. They stood there for a moment. Around them, the ordinary world continued its business. There's something you need to know, Logan said. If this keeps going, if this becomes what I think it might become. Haley, Scarlett said. Not a question. Haley, he confirmed. She's not a detail I introduce when it's convenient. She's the first thing. She's always the first thing. And what she thinks about the people in my life matters more to me than anything else. Scarlett nodded slowly. He had the sense she was hearing not just the words, but everything underneath them, the whole weight of what it meant to be the father he was to the daughter he had. I understand, she said. Do you? Because it's not... Logan, she said it steadily. I understand. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to keep going. He looked at her for a long moment. The afternoon light was doing something particular to the river, turning it a shade between gray and silver, and since somewhere behind them, a child was laughing at something their parent had said. Okay, he said. And then, after a moment, for the record, I kissed you back. She looked at him. I know you did. I just wanted to be clear that it was mutual. Corner of her mouth moved, noted. They started walking again. Not in the direction they'd been going before, but forward, which in this city, on this day, happened to be the same thing. In the weeks that followed, the phone calls became longer. Texts came more frequently. Logan found himself reaching for his phone in idle moments, not compulsively, not with anxiety, but with the particular unconscious reach of someone who has a person to tell things to. He told Scarlett about a customer who had called him 3 days in a row with technically different problems that were all, at root, the same problem, and who Logan had eventually figured out was calling not because of the technical issues, but because he was retired and the day was long. He'd stayed on the phone with the man for 45 minutes on the 3rd call, mostly just asking questions. When he told Scarlett, she was quiet for a moment. You're very kind, she said. He just needed someone to talk to. Most people would have transferred him to a supervisor after the 2nd call. Most people don't realize the call isn't about the software. How do you know what the call is about? Logan thought about it. You listen for what someone isn't saying. Another pause. Longer. He was beginning to understand that her longest pauses were the ones where she was most present. Logan, she said. Yeah, I'm falling for you. She said it the way she said most important things directly, without decoration, like a fact being stated into the record. I thought you should know. He sat with it for a moment. Wallace was sitting on the arm of the couch, watching him with the judgmental impartiality of a cat who has decided all human emotional processing is beneath commentary. I'm falling for you too, Logan said. I thought that was probably obvious, but I didn't want to assume. It was becoming obvious, Scarlett said, but it's better when someone says it. Yeah, he agreed. It is. Outside, Eugene was doing what Eugene did in August warm days that cooled suddenly after dark, the smell of cut grass and the distant sound of the highway. The ordinary sounds of a city that didn't know or care that something was happening in a small apartment where a man was sitting on a couch next to an indifferent orange cat, discovering, to his own considerable surprise, that he was not in fact done with wanting things. He had stopped believing that. He hadn't known he'd stopped until something came along that proved him wrong. That was the part nobody warned you about, not the falling the realizing. The moment you understood that you had quietly given up on something without anyone making a formal announcement, and that now, without warning, it had returned. Logan set his phone down on the cushion beside him. Wallace turned away unimpressed and began attending to his left ear. From the hallway, Haley's drawings were taped to the wall in a roe anglerfish. A blobfish, something she called a mystery creature that Logan suspected was entirely invented. He looked at them for a moment. He had a daughter who trusted him completely. He had a woman who made him feel, for the first time in years, like the version of himself he had assumed was gone. He had no idea yet what came next. But for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty felt less like a weight and more like a door he hadn't yet opened. Standing in a hallway he hadn't expected to find himself in a life that had just gotten significantly more complicated and significantly more worth living. The meeting between Scarlett and Haley was not planned. Logan had thought about it, turned it over in his mind the way you turn over something fragile carefully, with full attention to where your hands are, and had decided, without announcing the decision to anyone, that it would happen when it happened and not before. Haley was 7. She was perceptive in the specific way that children are perceptive before the world teaches them to filter what they notice. She would know if something was being performed for her benefit, and she would not forgive it. So Logan had not planned it, and then September arrived with a cold front and a Tuesday that went sideways in 3 directions at once, and the meeting happened anyway. It started with Scarlett's car. She had been driving back from a client site south of Eugene, a portfolio company she'd been visiting. One of those visits that was technically a check-in and was actually a quiet assessment of whether the leadership team was managing or merely surviving. Her regular driver had taken ill that morning, and she'd rented a car, which she did without complaint because she was capable of driving herself and occasionally preferred it, the solitude of a moving vehicle being one of the few genuinely uninterrupted spaces in her day. The car developed a problem somewhere on the 126. Not a dramatic failure, no smoke, no sudden noise. Just a warning light and a pulling sensation in the steering that Scarlett recognized as a tire losing pressure with the slow determination of something that has made up its mind. She pulled off at a gas station on the edge of town, looked at the rear tire, which was visibly deflating, and called Logan. He answered on the 3rd ring. She could hear store ambiance in the background, the particular acoustic texture of a grocery store, refrigerator hum, and distant intercom. I have a problem, she said. What kind? Flat tire. Or going flat. I'm at a gas station on Franklin. I don't know I can call a service. Don't call a service. I'm 12 minutes away. Logan, you're clearly at the grocery store. I'm at the grocery store with Haley, he said. Then, after a pause that she understood immediately, Scarlett. I know, she said. If I come to you, she comes with me. A beat. She looked at the tire. It was now definitively flat. Okay, she said. The 12 minutes were the longest she'd spent in a gas station parking lot. She had stood in boardrooms during hostile negotiations and not felt the particular kind of nervousness that settled in her chest while she waited for Logan Civic to pull in. She understood, in a way she hadn't fully accounted for before this moment, that Haley was not a peripheral element of this relationship. She was the center of it. Everything else, the phone calls, the bookstore, the waterfront in Portland, the kissing was happening on the edges of a life whose core was a 7-year-old girl who Scarlett had never met, and who would, in approximately 11 minutes, be looking at her and making assessments. Civic pulled in. Logan got out first, and his expression was she read it quickly, the way she read everything, not anxious exactly, but alert. Present, he was watching her. The passenger door opened, and Haley climbed out, still holding a package of cookies that Logan had apparently not yet managed to remove from her possession. She was small, dark-haired like her father, wearing a yellow raincoat that was slightly too large for her. She looked at Scarlett with the direct, unceremonious attention of a child who has not yet learned that staring is considered impolite in adult social contexts. Hi, Haley said. Hi, Scarlett said. Your tire's flat. I know. Dad can fix it. She glanced at Logan. Can you fix it? I can change it, Logan said. That's slightly different. He looked at Scarlett. You have a spare? It's a rental. I assume so. He went to the back of the car to check, which left Scarlett standing in a gas station parking lot with a package of cookies and a 7-year-old who was examining her with the thoroughness of a small scientist presented with a new specimen. Are you Dad's friend? Haley said. Yes, Scarlett said. My name's Scarlett. Haley considered this. That's a color. It is. My name's not a color. No, but Haley is a comet. That's better than a color. Haley's expression shifted. Not a full smile and acknowledgement, the look of someone who has been given a piece of information they find acceptable. I know about the comet, she said. Dad told me. It comes back every 75 years. That's right. I won't be alive when it comes back. Probably not, Scarlett said. But your great-grandchildren might be. Haley appeared to find this a reasonable consolation. She looked at the flat tire, then back at Scarlett. Do you like pizza? Scarlett blinked. Yes, what kind? Cheese, mostly. Sometimes vegetables. Not pepperoni? I can eat pepperoni. I'm not committed to it. Haley absorbed this with the solemnity of a judge receiving testimony. We have pizza on Fridays, she said. It's a rule. That sounds like a good rule. Dad says it's the only rule we never argue about. She paused. We argue about a lot of rules. Which ones? Bedtime. Screen time. Whether Wallace can sleep on my bed even though he never wants to anyway. She looked at Scarlett with something approaching suspicion. Do you like cats? I haven't spent much time with cats, Scarlett said honestly. But I don't dislike them. Wallace is Dad's cat. He chose Dad. Cats do that. They pick someone. A pause. He hasn't picked me yet. Maybe he's still deciding. Haley looked at her. How long does it take? I don't know. Probably depends on the cat. Haley appeared to consider the philosophical dimensions of this. Behind them, Logan had found the spare and was crouched at the rear wheel, working with the competent, unhurried efficiency of a man who has changed a tire before. Scarlett watched him for a moment, the set of his shoulders, the way he worked without commentary, and felt something move in her chest that she didn't try to name. Do you know fractions? Haley asked. Scarlett turned back. Yes, we're doing fractions in school. I don't understand why the bottom number gets bigger when you cut things into more pieces. Because the denominator tells you how many pieces the whole thing was cut into. More pieces means each piece is smaller, so the number goes up to show that. Haley was quiet for a moment, working through this. So if I cut a pizza into 8 pieces, each piece is smaller than if I cut it into 4. Exactly. But I still only eat 2 pieces either way. Then you've eaten 2/8 of the 8-piece pizza and 2/4 of the 4-piece pizza. Haley looked at her with an expression of dawning suspicion. Those are the same amount. They are. That's the point. A longer pause. Then nobody explained it like pizza before. Most things make more sense with pizza. Logan appeared at Scarlett's elbow. His hands were dirty. He held them slightly away from his jacket. Bears on, he said. It'll hold until you get to a tire place, but don't go on the highway with it. You can take Franklin all the way in. Thank you, Scarlett said. He looked at her with an expression she'd learned to read over the past months, watchful, careful, containing more than what was on the surface. She gave a small nod, the kind that communicated I'm okay without requiring words. Daddy, Haley said. Scarlett explained fractions. Pizza. Haley considered. She's good at explaining. Logan looked at Scarlett. Something in his expression shifted not relief exactly, but the loosening of something that had been held tight. You eaten? He said to Scarlett. No, we were about to. He glanced at Haley. There's enough, right? Haley looked at Scarlett with an expression that was still evaluating, but had moved perceptibly in a more favorable direction. Are you allergic to anything? No, good, because Dad already bought the pasta. That was how Scarlett Pembroke, founder and managing director of a firm that controlled billions of dollars in assets, found herself 45 minutes later, sitting at a kitchen table in a 700-square-foot apartment in Eugene, Oregon, eating spaghetti that Logan had cooked without ceremony or apology, while a 7-year-old corrected his reading of a chapter from a book about a girl and a crow because he had, apparently, mispronounced a character's name. It's Marin, Dad, not Marin. They say it in chapter 2. I've been saying it like that for 4 chapters. I know. I've been waiting for you to fix it. You could have told me. I was seeing if you'd figure it out. Logan set the book down and looked at his daughter. Character flaw. Haley looked unrepentant. Scarlett, how do you say it? Scarlett, who had been eating spaghetti and staying carefully in her lane, looked up. I'd say Marin, like the first syllable rhymes with care. Haley pointed at her father with her fork. He intercepted it gently, a reflex, the kind of automatic parental correction that happens without thought. Fork down when you're pointing, he said. Fine. She pointed with her finger instead. Scarlett agrees with me. Scarlett is a guest. Guests can be right. Scarlett pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. Logan caught it and gave her a look that said, very clearly, don't encourage her, which she received and chose to interpret loosely. After dinner, while Logan was cleaning up, Haley brought Scarlett her reading project, a book report she was working on, about a deep-sea fish called the oarfish, which Haley had selected on the basis that it was, in her words, extremely underrated. The report was handwritten in pencil on notebook paper, illustrated with drawings that were ambitious in conception and still finding their technical footing. Does it make sense? Haley said. Scarlett read it carefully. It did make sense. The argument that the oarfish's reputation as a sea monster was unfair, given that it was a relatively passive creature being cited in situations where its behavior was already compromised, was, for a second-grade reading project, genuinely coherent. This is good, Scarlett said. Haley looked at her directly. Do you mean that, or are you being nice? I mean it. The argument is logical. You might want to add one more fact about what the oarfish actually eats, so people understand it's not a threat. It eats squid and small crustaceans, Haley said immediately. I already know that. I just forgot to put it in. Then put it in. It'll make the conclusion stronger. Haley took the paper back and looked at it. Okay, she paused. Kind of like a teacher. I'm not a teacher. What do you do? Scarlett considered how to answer this in a way that was honest and also comprehensible to a 7-year-old. I run a company that helps other companies grow. I look at businesses and decide which ones are worth investing money in. Haley appeared to file this away. Like Shark Tank? Scarlett blinked. Yes, she said, a little like that. Dad watches that sometimes. He always thinks the people who don't take the deal are making a mistake. Sometimes they are, Scarlett said. Sometimes they aren't. How do you know the difference? You look at whether the thing they're giving up is worth more than the thing they're getting. Haley thought about this. What if you can't tell? Then you make the best decision you can with what you know, and you accept that you might be wrong. Pause. Haley looked at her with something that had moved entirely out of evaluation, and into something else, something that looked, to Scarlett, like a recognition of some kind. The look of a child who has been spoken to directly and has noticed. That's what Dad says about hard decisions, Haley said. He says you just have to pick and then deal with it. Your dad is right. Haley nodded, apparently satisfied. I'm going to add the squid part, she said, and went to find her pencil. Logan appeared in the doorway. He'd dried his hands and was leaning against the frame, looking at Scarlett with an expression she didn't have a category for yet. Bedtime in 20 minutes, he told Haley. I need to fix my report first. Fix and then bed. He looked at Scarlett. She looked back at him. They didn't say anything. Later, after Haley had been put to bed, a process that involved the report revisions, an argument about whether Wallace could be persuaded to sleep on her bed if they put a blanket down that smelled like Logan, which he attempted, and Wallace declined with regal indifference, and 2 chapters of the Crow book with the name pronounced correctly. Logan came back to the living room and sat on the couch. Scarlett was still at the kitchen table with a cup of tea he'd made her. She'd been looking at one of Haley's other drawings, which was pinned to the wall alongside several others, a gallery of deep-sea creatures rendered in crayon, each one labeled in careful handwriting. She's remarkable, Scarlett said. Yeah, he said it the way a person says something they already know but don't get tired of hearing. She really is. She asked me if I meant it, about the report. She does that. He looked at her. What did you say? I told her I meant it. Then I told her what to add. She told me. She seemed pleased. He paused. Which, for Haley, looks like not being displeased. Scarlett set down the tea. The apartment was quiet. Wallace had settled on the arm of the couch near Logan, which was apparently his preferred position. Once Haley was asleep, and he could operate without the social pressure of being asked to perform affection. Outside the street was the particular quiet of a Tuesday night in a neighborhood that went to bed at a reasonable hour. I should get going, Scarlett said. The tire place opens at 8. You're not driving to Portland tonight. The spare's not... I know, I'll stay at a hotel. Logan looked at her for a moment. She could see him thinking not about what to say, but about what was true and what he was willing to say because it was true. You can stay here, he said. Couch is not comfortable. But it's a couch. Logan, Haley's in the next room, he said, steady, clear. I'm not suggesting anything other than a couch, but I'd rather you not drive to a hotel on a spare tire at 9 at night. She looked at him. The practicality of the offer was real. So was the thing underneath it, the careful delineation of what this was and wasn't, the respect built into the limitation. The couch, he confirmed. He brought her a pillow and a blanket that smelled like dryer sheets, and they said goodnight in the hallway with approximately 8 inches between them, and Logan went to his room and closed the door. Scarlett lay on the couch, which was genuinely not comfortable, and looked at the ceiling of the apartment while Wallace came to investigate her with the clinical interest of an entity who has decided the terms of his own curiosity. He sat at the edge of the cushion and looked at her. "Don't start," she said quietly. He turned around twice and settled against her feet. In the morning, Haley came out at 6:50 and found Scarlett awake on the couch reading something on her phone, because sleeping in unfamiliar places was not something Scarlett's nervous system had ever quite accepted. Haley stopped in the doorway, looked at her, looked at Wallace, who was still at her feet, and said, "He never does that." "Does what?" "Sits with people he doesn't know." Scarlett looked at the cat. The cat looked elsewhere with manufactured indifference. "Maybe he's decided," Scarlett said. Haley looked at her steadily for a moment. Then she went to the kitchen and got herself a glass of water, and came back and sat on the other end of the couch, and turned on the television at low volume. And the two of them sat together in the early morning quiet while Logan slept for another 40 minutes, which Haley's said he was allowed to do, on days he didn't have early calls. They watched a nature program. It was about migratory birds. Haley provided commentary. When Logan came out, still in yesterday's t-shirt and clearly not fully awake, he stopped in the doorway of the living room and looked at the two of them, on the couch, Scarlett upright, Haley half reclined against the armrest, Wallace between them like a mediator who had taken on the job without being asked. He looked at this for a moment without saying anything. "Then I'm making pancakes." "Yes," Haley said immediately. He looked at Scarlett. "Yes," she said, "he made pancakes." Haley required hers in a stack of 4, the top one with a face drawn in syrup, which Logan executed without comment in the manner of someone who has been doing this long enough that it is simply the shape the task takes. Scarlett had 2 plain, and did not say that they were the best pancakes she'd had in recent memory, because she had said that about the tacos, and she recognized a pattern forming. They were. She left after breakfast. The tire place opened at 8. She had a call at 10, and the morning had the quality of something complete in itself. She didn't want to extend it into something it wasn't yet. She said goodbye to Haley, who was already thinking about something else, and said goodbye with the absent thoroughness of a child who has filed you in a category and moved on. She said goodbye to Logan at the door. "Thank you," she said, "for the tire and the couch. The couch was terrible." "Yes, but thank you anyway." He looked at her. The morning light was doing something unremarkable and some significant to the hallway. "She likes you," he said. "She won't say it, but she does." Scarlett looked at him. Something in her chest was doing the thing it had been doing more and more frequently in the past months, something that required significantly more attention than she usually gave to her own internal states. "I like her too," she said. "She's going to be formidable." "She already is," Logan said. "I'm just trying to keep up." 3 weeks after that morning, a photograph appeared on a website that covered the intersection of business news and celebrity gossip, a category of publication Scarlett had never read and had always considered a nuisance in the way that most. Background noise is a nuisance, present but ignorable. The photograph had been taken outside the bookstore on 5th, on the day of their first date in Eugene. Whoever had taken it had been on the opposite side of the street, which meant a telephoto lens, which meant it was not accidental. The photograph showed Scarlett and Logan walking out of the bookstore. She was carrying her books. He was saying something that had made her laugh. The image caught the laugh, her head slightly back. The real version, not the managed version she deployed in professional settings. It was a good photograph, technically. Clear, well-composed, catching something genuine. She hated it. The headline beneath it read, "Billionaire CEO Scarlett Pembroke's mystery man. Who is he?" By the following morning, Logan's name had been identified. By that afternoon, his employer had been located. By evening, a secondary outlet had published a piece that described him as a tech support worker and single father, talking, and had included this was the part that made Scarlett's jaw tighten when she read it, a reference to his daughter. Not Haley's name, just the fact of her existence. Scarlett was in her San Francisco office when she read it. She closed her laptop, sat for a moment, and then called Logan. He answered after 1 ring. She could tell from the quality of his silence that he'd already seen it. "How bad?" she said. "They mentioned Haley, I know. I'm sorry, don't apologize. You didn't take the photo. I should have been more careful." "Scarlett." His voice was even. Controlled in the way that meant the control was costing him something. "This isn't your fault. But I need to think about what this means for her. People are going to start looking, and she's 7 years old and she goes to school and she doesn't—" He stopped. "She doesn't need to be part of this. I know. I have people who handle this." PR, legal, I can make calls today. Can you make it go away? Pause. Honest answer, I can contain it. I can minimize the follow-up coverage. Can't make the original story disappear. Logan was quiet for a moment. There are people outside the school, he said. I got a call from the principal this morning. Someone with a camera was sitting across the street. They left when the school called the non-emergency line, but they were there. Scarlett sat with this. The physical reality of it, someone outside Haley's school with a camera landed in a way that the abstract idea of media coverage had not. Tell me what you need, she said. I need her to be safe. Then that's what we're going to make happen. And I need to know, he stopped again, started over. I need to know if you want to walk away from this. If it's easier for you if this just stops, she said. Don't finish that sentence. Logan, I said don't. She heard her own voice harder than she intended, the edge of something that was not anger at him but was anger, and she took a breath. I am not walking away. I am calling my team in the next 10 minutes, and we are going to figure out how to protect Haley and manage this, and it is going to be handled, and you and I are not. I am not doing this. Do you understand? A long pause. Yeah, Logan said. Quieter, something released in it. Good. Scarlett. What? Thank you. She exhaled. I'll call you tonight after I've talked to the team. She made 5 calls in the next 2 hours. Her communications director, her legal team, a contact at the original publication, and 2 people she trusted who had navigated similar situations for clients. By the following morning, the secondary outlet had removed the reference to Logan's daughter. The original photograph story had run its natural life cycle 2 days of online attention before the news cycle moved to something else without generating a follow-up investigation piece, which had been the primary concern. The person outside the school did not return. 2 weeks later, Logan drove to San Francisco for the first time. She had offered to come to him again, and he had said no, with the particular tone he used when he'd made a decision and was not interested in renegotiating. He had arranged for Haley to stay with his mother, taken 2 days off work, and driven south. She met him at the door of her apartment, which she realized, as she was doing it, was something she had not done for a guest in a very long time, stood at the door waiting, watching the elevator, and felt the particular quality of anticipation that has no professional equivalent. He came off the elevator in jeans and a jacket, carrying a bag, looking like himself. That was the thing about Logan. He always looked like himself. He didn't adjust for environments. He walked into her apartment, which was large, high-ceilinged, city views, the kind of space that was designed to communicate success, and looked around once, took it in, and then looked at her. Nice place, he said. It's too big, she said. He looked at her. For one person. It's too big. He set his bag down. Have you always thought that? No, she said. I've only thought it recently. He came across the room and kissed her, not the way they'd kissed on the waterfront, which had been declarative, a statement. This was something different, longer, more like a conversation than a declaration. When they stopped, she said, I ordered food. It should be here in 20 minutes. What kind? Thai. From a place that's actually good, not impressive. You're learning, he said. I'm learning, she agreed. They ate at her kitchen counter, because the dining table was, she admitted, essentially decorative. She hadn't eaten at it in 4 months. Logan said that seemed about right. She said she was aware. He said he wasn't judging. She told him she knew he wasn't, which was part of why she'd told him. They talked until midnight, about the media situation and how it had settled. About Haley, who had apparently informed Logan's mother that she'd met a woman named Scarlett, who was good at fractions, and whose name was a color, which Logan's mother had received, with the careful neutrality of a woman who had many questions, but knew better than to ask all of them at once. About Scarlett's firm and a decision she'd been sitting with for 3 months about restructuring one of her funds, which she walked Logan through, not because he had financial expertise, but because talking through things out loud with someone who was genuinely listening was the clearest thinking she did. He asked good questions, not expert questions, real ones. The kind that came from paying attention to what you'd said 3 sentences ago. At midnight, she said he should sleep because he'd driven 8 hours. He said he was fine. She told him the guest room was made up. He said she didn't have to put him in the guest room. She looked at him for a moment, the whole weight of what he'd said sitting in the air between them. Not yet, she said. Steady, clear, not apologetic. He nodded. No argument, no pressure, just the nod of a person who has heard something and understood it. Guest room's fine, he said. Logan. Yeah, it's not a rejection. Just she stopped. I want this to be something that lasts. And I've made mistakes before by moving in a direction before I was sure, and then losing the whole thing. I know, he said. I wasn't pushing. I know you weren't. I just wanted you to know the reason. He looked at her for a moment, the direct, attending look that she had found disarming from the first night on the terrace. "Scarlett," he said, "I have a 7-year-old daughter who is going to need to be part of whatever this becomes. I am not in a hurry to rush into anything either." She looked at him. "She asked me that first morning if I'd meant what I said about her report. I remember. She wanted to know if I was performing." "Yeah, she does that." He paused. "What'd you think of the question?" "I thought it was the most important question anyone had asked me in a long time." Scarlett held his gaze. "I don't perform for her. I won't." Logan was quiet for a moment. The city was doing what cities do at midnight present, moving, indifferent to the interior lives of two people standing in a kitchen, figuring out how to be careful with something that mattered. "Good," he said finally. "Then we're going to be okay." She wasn't certain he was right. Certainty had never been something Logan offered her, which was, she'd come to understand, precisely why she trusted him. He didn't promise things he couldn't control. He simply told her what he believed and let it be what it was. She turned off the kitchen light. They said goodnight in the hallway, and the guest room door closed. And Scarlett went to her room and lay in the large bed in the too-large apartment and looked at the city lights shifting on the ceiling and thought about a 7-year-old girl who had asked an honest question and a man who drove 8 hours and didn't push, and a couch that was genuinely terrible, and a cat who had apparently decided. She thought about all of this for a long time before she slept. And when she slept well, which was not, in recent years, something she'd been able to say without qualification. The media attention faded the way most small storms fade, not with a clear ending, but with a gradual loss of energy, the coverage thinning from daily to occasional to a background presence that was manageable if not entirely invisible. Scarlett's communications team had done their job with the particular efficiency that comes from having done it before, and Logan's name receded from the gossip cycle within 3 weeks, displaced by something louder and more immediately scandalous involving a different public figure entirely. But what the crisis had exposed did not fade with it. They had been conducting a relationship across 90 miles and 2 very different lives, and for a while that distance had been workable, even useful, in the way that space is sometimes useful when 2 people are still figuring out what they are to each other. The drives, the phone calls, the long weekends that ended with someone getting back in a car and returning to their own life. It had been sustainable as a beginning. It was not sustainable as a continuation. Logan understood this before either of them said it. He noticed it in the texture of the Sunday evenings when Scarlett drove back to San Francisco or caught a flight from Portland, the particular quality of the quiet that settled in the apartment after she left. Haley noticed it too, though she expressed it obliquely, the way children express things they don't have full vocabulary for. She started asking on Thursday evenings whether Scarlett was coming that weekend. When the answer was no, because Scarlett had a board meeting, a client trip, an obligation that could not be moved, Haley would say okay and go back to whatever she'd been doing, and Logan would watch her go and feel the weight of something that didn't yet have a name. It was a Saturday in November when they finally had the conversation. Haley was at a birthday party for a classmate, which gave them 3 hours in the apartment without the particular alertness that Haley's presence always required, not an unpleasant alertness, just the constant low-level awareness of a parent who is always partly attending to a child, even when not directly engaged with them. Scarlett had driven up from San Francisco the previous evening. She'd slept in his bed for the first time, because not yet had become now somewhere in the months between the guest room in San Francisco and this particular Friday night, arrived at without announcement or ceremony, which was the way both of them preferred to arrive at things. They were sitting at the kitchen table with coffee when Logan said, "This doesn't work." Scarlett looked at him over her mug. Which part? The distance, the 90 minutes, the way it's always someone driving somewhere and then leaving. He set his mug down. It worked when we were figuring out what this was. It doesn't work now that we know. She was quiet for a moment. He'd said it before she could, which he suspected she'd been aware of, had been circling it for weeks. "I know," she said. "So what do we do about it?" She looked at her coffee. He had learned to read her silences. This one was the kind where she was not uncertain, but was being careful about how she moved forward. The way someone is careful on a path they've assessed and decided to take but no requires attention. "I've been thinking about stepping back," she said. "Not from the firm, but from running it day to day." Logan looked at her. "That's a significant thing." "Because of this? Because of me? Because of everything?" She met his eyes. "I've been running it at full capacity for 6 years. I'm 30 years old and I haven't taken a vacation that lasted longer than 4 days." I have a managing partner, Derek, who is entirely capable of handling day-to-day operations and has been doing a significant portion of it quietly for the past 2 years anyway, because I've been distracted. She paused. You've been the distraction. I'm not saying that as a complaint. I know you're not. I was going to do it eventually. The structure was always going to evolve. You moved the timeline. Logan sat with this. The scale of what she was describing was not lost on him. A person who had built something from the ground up over 6 years does not hand the daily controls to someone else without it costing something, regardless of how ready they tell themselves they are. Are you sure? He said. No, she said, which was, he had come to understand, the most honest answer she could give. Scarlett did not perform certainty she didn't have, but I'm sure that what I want is here, and you can't commute to what you want. At some point you have to actually go there. Eugene, he said. Eugene, she confirmed. He looked at her for a moment. You're going to move to Eugene, Oregon. Yes. You have a 1,200 square foot apartment in San Francisco with city views. It's too big, she said. You know this. I do know this. She looked at him steadily. Are you going to tell me it's too much? That I'm giving up too much? Are you? Logan, I'm asking a real question. She actually considered it, the way she'd consider a major allocation decision, without rushing to the comfortable answer. No, she said, I'm not. What I'd be giving up is a commute and an office I can replicate anywhere. What I'd be keeping is the firm, the work, the thing I actually built. I'm not dismantling anything. I'm changing where I operate from. She paused. And I'd be gaining this. She indicated the kitchen, the apartment, and by extension, everything it contained, the drawings on the walls, the cat asleep on the windowsill, the sound of a neighborhood that moved at human pace. I've been trying to figure out what I actually want my life to look like. And I can see it now. I couldn't before. Logan was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the street was doing its Saturday morning business, a dog being walked, someone's music from an apartment above. I need to say something, he said, and I need you to hear it as what it is, not as an obstacle. Okay, I'm not going to let you support us, me and Haley. If we do this, if we live together, I need to carry my share. I know what the difference in our incomes is. I'm not pretending it's not real. But I cannot be in a situation where I'm the person in the house who doesn't contribute, because that will do something to me that I won't be able to fix. She looked at him for a moment. He could seize her deciding not to argue the point, not because she agreed with the logic of it, but because she understood what it was actually about, which was not money but dignity, and she was smart enough to know the difference. Okay, she said. Okay, Logan, I hear you. She held his gaze. So, what are you going to do about it? He'd been thinking about this for longer than he'd admitted. I want to finish my degree, he said. I dropped out with 2 semesters left. Communications, I can do it online, there are programs. He picked up his coffee. And I want to look for work that's actually connected to what I studied. Not as a favor, not through you, on my own. That's going to take time. I know. You'll be doing tech support while you finish the degree. Yes, and that's okay with you. It's okay with me, he paused. It's not forever, and it was always going to take time. I stopped letting myself think about it as something that could still happen. You made me start thinking about it again. Scarlett looked at him with the expression that she had when she was containing something, not holding it back so much as holding it carefully, the way you hold something that matters. There might be a position, she said carefully, in the communications arm of one of my portfolio companies. It's not a favor position, it's a real role. Reporting to people who don't know me personally, doing actual work. It would be starting level because you don't have the degree yet, but it would be real. I'd want to apply like anyone else. You'd have to. I can't be involved in the hiring. I'd be disclosing a conflict and stepping away from any decision. If I applied and they decided I wasn't the right person, then you weren't the right person, she said, and you'd find something else. He looked at her. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things. How long? She looked at her coffee. Since the morning after the tire, she said. When I came out, and Haley was on the couch watching birds, and Wallace was sitting with you with her. With both of you. She paused. I sat at that kitchen table, and I thought this is what I've been trying to find. And I'd been looking in the wrong places for a very long time. Logan didn't say anything for a moment. Then she's going to want purple walls. What? Her room. If we find a house. She's been campaigning for purple walls for 8 months, and I've been putting it off because we're renting. She's going to want purple walls. Scarlett looked at him steadily. Something in her face was doing the thing, the moving thing, the thing without a clean name. Then she'll have purple walls, she said. The house took 6 weeks to find. Not because of the money. Scarlett could have bought any house in Eugene outright, and the process would still have taken 6 weeks because finding the right house in the right neighborhood near Haley's. School was not a financial problem, but a practical one. Logan was involved in every showing. Haley was involved in 3, which was strategically calibrated enough to feel included, not so many that the process became exhausting for a 7-year-old who had strong opinions and limited patience for adult deliberation. The house they chose was a 3-bedroom craftsman, 4 blocks from Haley's school, built in 1962, with an outdated kitchen, a back fence that leaned at an angle that suggested it had made a decision about its structural future, and a living room that got afternoon light in a way that made everything look slightly warmer than it was. Previous owners had put carpet over hardwood floors, which the inspector mentioned and Logan noted, and Scarlett cataloged for future reference. It was not a mansion. It was not a large house by any standard. The master bedroom closet had a sliding door that came off its track if you opened it too fast, which Logan, on the second showing, and reported to Scarlett, who looked at the closet and said she could live with it. You could renovate the whole thing, Logan said. Kitchen fence the closet. Not right away, she said. I want to live in it first. Figure out what it actually needs versus what I think it needs. He looked at her. That's very reasonable for someone who could gut the entire structure and rebuild it. I'm trying something new, she said. Haley's reaction to her room was not the elaborate performance of joy that adults sometimes expect from children when good news is delivered. She walked in, stood in the center of the empty room, looked at the walls, looked at the window, looked at the closet. Can it be purple? She said. Yes, Logan said. What kind of purple? What kind do you want? She thought about it with the gravity of a person making an architectural decision. Not light purple, real purple. We'll look at colors, he said. You can pick. She nodded, satisfied. Then she looked at Scarlett. Where's your room? I'm sharing with your dad, Scarlett said. Haley processed this. That's what married people do, she said, with the factual tone she used for information she'd already filed under known things. It's what people do when they're together, Scarlett said. Another process. Then are you together? Yes, Logan said. Haley looked between them. Then she shrugged, which was her gesture, for this is acceptable information, and went to look at the closet. The move itself was not smooth. Scarlett's San Francisco apartment had to be handled. She kept it, for now, because the firm had operations there, and she traveled back twice a month, and selling a property is not a decision to make under time pressure. Her furniture was largely wrong for the Eugene house, which they both knew, and the practical solution was to furnish the house with a combination of Logan's existing furniture, which had the character of furniture that has been lived in, which is to say it was real and selective new pieces chosen without the pressure of impressing anyone. Wallace greeted the new house with the philosophical acceptance of a cat who has learned that his environment will periodically change without his consent and has made peace with it. He located a patch of afternoon sun in the living room within 48 hours and claimed it as definitively as he had claimed Logan years earlier. Haley's walls were painted purple on the second weekend. It was a true purple rich, unambiguous, the kind of color that commits. Logan had worried privately that it would be a lot. Haley was delighted with its being a lot. Scarlett looked at the finished room and said it suited the person who would live in it, which was the precise right thing to say and which Logan recognized as not having been calculated. It was just true, and Scarlett said true things. The adjustments, when they came sideways. Not from catastrophe, but from the ordinary friction of 3 people learning the shape of a shared life. Scarlett worked too much. This was not a surprise. She had told him she worked too much, had always worked too much, and restructuring the firm's management had reduced her workload without eliminating the intensity of her relationship to work, which was not about hours but about attention. She was present at dinner, and then sometimes not present at dinner, physically there, fork in hand, but clearly somewhere else in her mind, parsing something, running a number, remembering a sentence from a report she'd read that morning. Logan had learned to recognize the look and learned, mostly, not to take it personally. Mostly. You're gone again, he said one evening. She looked up. Haley was already in her room, homework done, reading. Kitchen was post-dinner quiet. Sorry, Scarlett said. Don't apologize. Just come back. I was thinking about the Meridian situation. Is the Meridian situation urgent right now, tonight at 7:30? She paused. No, then it can wait until tomorrow. She looked at him for a moment. Not defensively, he had learned. That was not her default response to being called on something. She actually looked at the question. I don't know how to turn it off cleanly, she said. I never learned to have an end to the workday. There was no one waiting for me. The work just continued. There's someone waiting now. I know, she said it quietly. I'm working on it. I know you are. He picked up her plate and his and took them to the sink. I'm not criticizing. I'm just telling me you notice. Yeah, that's fair, she said. Keep doing that. Logan had his own friction, which was less visible but not less real. There were evenings when he looked at what Scarlett had built the firm, the reputation, the 1,200 square foot San Francisco apartment she still owned, ease with which she moved through the world of money and power, and felt the old smallness settle in him like weather. Not jealousy, something more specific, the awareness of a gap that no amount of mutual affection could pretend wasn't there. He was a tech support worker, finishing an online communications degree in the evenings after Haley went to bed. She managed billions. He didn't say this to her immediately. Carried it for a few weeks, which was too long, and she noticed before he said anything. She noticed the way she noticed most things, quietly and with precision. What's going on with you? She said one night. Late, the house quiet. Nothing. Logan. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. I feel small sometimes, he said, next to what you are. I know that's my problem, not yours, but it's real. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, she didn't try to reassure him that it wasn't true, which would have been kind and useless. She said, I know. I've been watching it. You didn't say anything. I was waiting for you to. He turned to look at her in the dark. That's very patient of you. I've been working on patience. She paused. You know what I see when I look at you? I see a man who raised a remarkable child essentially alone, while working a job that never touched what he was capable of, and who did it without complaint and without asking anyone to make his life easier. Not small, Logan. That's the opposite of small. She paused again. The degree and the job, those will come. But the thing that makes you who you are was already there. He didn't answer right away. He lay there with what she'd said and didn't try to immediately assess or qualify it. He just let it land. Haley asked me last week if we were going to be a family, he said eventually. Like officially. Scarlett turned to look at him. What did you tell her? I told her I thought so. He paused. She asked if that meant you'd be her mom. I said you were Scarlett. That you were going to be here, that it didn't need a specific name. He was quiet for a moment. She said okay. She said Scarlett was a good name anyway. A silence. The house settled the way old houses settle some small creak, some shift in the structure. Did she mean it? Scarlett said. She did. She doesn't say things she doesn't mean. No, Scarlett said. She doesn't. Another silence. She asked me something else, Logan said. She asked if Scarlett would still be here in 5 years. He paused. I told her yes. I said that was the plan. He turned his head to look at her. Is that the plan? Scarlett looked at him in the dark. He could see, even in the low light, the fullness of her attention, the thing she had that was different from most people, the quality of being completely present when she decided to be. That's the plan, she said. He nodded. Okay, Logan. Yeah. Ask me properly sometime, when you're ready. He looked at her. The meaning of it was clear. He felt it move through him, not alarm, not pressure. Something quieter, something that felt like arrival. When I'm ready, he said. The evening it shifted. The evening the three of them stopped being an arrangement and became something with a different name came without announcement. It was an ordinary evening in March, the kind of evening that has no particular significance in the calendar of events. Haley had had a difficult day at school, a friendship difficulty, the kind that is enormous at 7 and invisible to adults, and which Logan had handled with the careful seriousness it deserved, even though his instinct was to tell her that school friendships were temporary and the court charity and the world was large. He hadn't said that. He'd sat with her on her purple-walled bedroom floor and listened to the whole thing and said, that sounds really hard, and you were right to feel upset about that. And eventually Haley had wound down from the emotion and asked if they could watch something. They were in the living room. Haley was on the couch between Logan and Scarlett, technically watching a nature program, but actually half asleep, which happened this way. Sometimes she would insist she wasn't tired and then be unconscious within 20 minutes of sitting still. Wallace was on the arm of the couch on Scarlett's side. He had made this transition gradually over the preceding months from Logan's constant to Haley's occasional to Scarlett's shoulder when nobody was making a particular issue of it. From the kitchen, Logan had queued up a playlist on his phone, connected to the small speaker on the counter. Something without lyrics, just sound. He had forgotten it was on. Scarlett had forgotten it was on. Then a song came through, something's older, something with a slow, undeniable pulse, and Scarlett heard it the way you hear something when the room is quiet enough. She stood up carefully, so as not to disturb Haley. who made a small noise and settled back against the couch cushion without waking. She walked into the kitchen doorway. Logan was washing the dinner dishes, back to her. She reached out and touched his arm. He turned. "Dance with me," she said. He looked at her for a moment. The kitchen was not large. The lighting was the ordinary overhead lighting of a kitchen that needed updating. There was a dish towel in his hand. He dried his hands. Put the towel on the counter. They moved together in the kitchen, the way people do when the space is small and the song is slow, and there's no particular reason to be doing this, except that it is the right thing to do in the moment, and both people know it. Logan's hand at her waist, her face near his shoulder. Not the careful choreography of the wedding dance, where they'd both been strangers being deliberate. Something different, something that had weight behind it. He was thinking about the terrace at the Hendricks estate, the June night. The two people who didn't know each other's names yet, standing in the dark admitting to a loneliness that had seemed, at the time, like a polite and temporary exchange. He had not known then. He had not known what the woman in the dark green dress would become, or what she would find in his apartment, or how she would sit on the floor of Haley's room and explain fractions using pizza and mean every word of it. From the living room, a small voice, "You guys are dancing." Neither of them stopped. "Yes," Logan said, a pause. Haley had apparently woken up and was watching them from the couch with the evaluative expression she deployed when assessing whether something was acceptable or alarming. "In the kitchen," she said. The tone suggested this was architecturally dubious. "Also yes," Scarlett said. Another pause longer. Logan could feel Haley working through it. "That's weird," she said finally. They kept dancing. "But good weird," Haley added. A verdict delivered and then apparently closed, because the next sound was the resumption of the nature program. Logan pressed his face lightly against Scarlett's hair. She made a small sound, not quite a laugh but adjacent to it. "Good weird," he said quietly. "I'll take it," she said. The dish towel was still on the counter. The water in the sink was going cold. Outside, March was being March damp and provisional, not yet committed to anything. The back fence leaned its usual lean. Wallace appeared in the kitchen doorway, observed the situation, and withdrew without comment. There was no version of this that was perfect. Scarlett still disappeared into her work in ways that required gentle retrieval. Logan still felt the smallness sometimes, late at night, looking at the gap between what he was and what he was working toward. Haley still had days when sharing her father felt like a subtraction rather than an addition. And on those days, she was difficult in the particular way that 7-year-olds are difficult, when they're feeling something they don't have the words for yet. And Logan had to hold space for that without making Scarlett feel blamed for it, which was a balance he did not always get right. They argued about logistics, about Scarlett's travel schedule, about a decision she'd made regarding the Meridian situation without looping Logan in, even though it affected the household, timing, a small thing that had touched something larger about what it meant to make decisions together. About Logan's tendency to internalize worry until it came out sideways, which she found difficult, and told him so with the directness that was sometimes exactly right and sometimes landed too hard. They got through the arguments. Not gracefully. Not always. Sometimes they got through them with an edge still in the air the next morning that required a separate, smaller conversation to clear. But they got through them. And then there were evenings like this one. Kitchen dancing. The nature program in the other room. The verdict of good weird, delivered by an 8-pound authority in a purple-walled bedroom, who had once asked if Scarlett meant what she said, and had received an honest answer, and had decided that was enough. Logan held Scarlett in the kitchen and thought about what enough was. Not settling. Not resignation. The actual thing, the life you find yourself in when you stop insisting it should be a different shape, when you let the shape it has taken be the one you inhabit. He had stopped expecting anything extraordinary at 32. He had been standing alone near a bar at a wedding, counting minutes. She had crossed the room, and the ordinary life he'd been living inside had turned out to contain, without his knowing, everything necessary for the life he had stopped believing he deserved. He was not done being afraid of that. He was not done feeling small sometimes, or uncertain, or aware of all the ways this could still go wrong if they weren't careful, if they stopped paying attention. He was not done with any of it, but he was done facing it alone. The song moved through its final measures. They slowed with it. In the other room, the nature program said something authoritative about migratory patterns. Wallace reappeared in the doorway, considered the kitchen, and walked directly to his food bowl with the purposeful energy of a cat who has remembered something important. Scarlett lifted her head from his shoulder and looked at him. "You still have dishes," she said. "I know, I'll dry." You don't have to, Logan. She picked up the dish towel from the counter and held it out. I live here, he looked at her, at the dish towel. Kitchen that needed updating, and the fence that needed repair, and the house that had been chosen, not because it was impressive, but because it was right. He turned on the water. She picked up the first dish, and they finished the dishes together, the way people do when a shared life has finally stopped being something they're building toward and become, simply, the life they're living. He asked her on a Tuesday, not because Tuesday was romantic. It wasn't. It was the least romantic day of the week, too far from the weekend in either direction, carrying the particular flatness of a day that exists mainly to move you from Monday toward something better. Logan had not planned Tuesday. He had planned a Saturday in April, had thought about a specific location, a specific moment, had run through versions of it in his head with the self-conscious thoroughness of a man who has never proposed to anyone and is aware that this is the kind of thing you only want to do once and do correctly. But it was a Tuesday in late February, and they were in the kitchen again. They were always in the kitchen. He'd noticed the important things happened in the kitchen, and Haley was at his mother's for the night because his mother had developed a tradition of Tuesday sleepovers that Haley considered non-negotiable and that Logan had stopped trying to rationalize and simply accept it as part of the schedule. Scarlett was making tea, which she did at 9 o'clock most evenings now, with the mechanical regularity of someone who has finally installed a habit that sticks. She was wearing a sweatshirt he was fairly certain had started as his, and had migrated to her side of the closet through the slow annexation process that happens when two people share a space long enough. Logan was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He had submitted his final paper for the semester 3 hours earlier, the last requirement, before his communications degree, which he would finish in May, 8 years after he'd stopped. He hadn't told Scarlett yet. He'd been sitting with it privately for 3 hours, the way you sit with something you've been reaching toward for a long time and have finally touched. He looked at her standing at the counter waiting for the kettle, sweatshirt, the bare feet on the kitchen floor, the way she was scrolling something on her phone with the focused but low-intensity attention of a person winding down from a day rather than working. He thought, she asked me to ask her properly when I was ready. He thought, I'm ready. He closed the laptop. He stood up. He crossed the kitchen to the drawer beside the refrigerator where, 6 weeks ago, he had placed a ring in a small box inside a folded dish towel at the back of the drawer, a location he had chosen because Scarlett never went into that drawer, because it was the drawer where Logan kept things that didn't have other homes' expired coupons, a screwdriver, 3 batteries of uncertain charge. She had never looked in that drawer. He had verified this with the particular vigilance of a man guarding something important. He took the box out. The kettle began to make the preliminary sounds of a kettle approaching boil. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding a small box and a dish towel. Scarlett turned around. She looked at him, at the dish towel, at his face. He watched the recognition move through her expression, not shock, not the performed surprise of someone who never saw this coming, but something quieter. The look of a person who has been waiting for a thing and has just understood it has arrived. Logan, she said. I finished the degree, he said. Tonight, the last paper. He paused. I wanted to have something that was mine before I did this. I wanted to be not to be the person you rescued, to be a person who had put himself back together and was standing here intact. He looked at her. I'm not there all the way yet. I know that, but I'm far enough. She set her phone on the counter. She didn't say anything. He opened the dish towel, took the box, opened it. The ring was not extravagant. He had thought hard about this, had been aware of the absurdity of a conversation that would have to be had if he'd bought something too small for a woman of her means, and the different absurdity of buying something he couldn't actually afford in order to perform a gesture she'd never asked him to perform. He had bought something honest. A good stone, a clean setting, something with genuine quality, but not the kind of quality that announces itself. The kind of ring you choose when what you're trying to say is, I was serious about this, and not look what I can do. He had borrowed the down payment from his mother and was paying it back monthly. His mother had not asked questions. She had said about time and written the check. I know you could buy a better ring, he said. I know you could buy a better everything. But this is what I can give you right now. And what I'm asking is whether you want to be married to a man who's still becoming who he's trying to be, who has a daughter with purple walls and a cat that has everyone fooled about his personality, and who is never going to be the most impressive person in the room you're standing in, but is always going to be the person who is most glad you're there. The kettle came to full boil and switched off. Scarlett stepped across the kitchen. She took his face in both hands and kissed him before he could say anything else, which he had not been planning to, because he'd said what he meant, and there was nothing to add. When she pulled back, she said yes. I didn't technically ask the question. Logan. I should probably say the words. Yes, she said again, clearly and firmly, and with the small, complicated, almost smile she had. The answer is yes, whatever words you put around it. He put the ring on her finger. His hands were not entirely steady. She noticed and did not say anything about it, which was the right call. It fits, she said, looking at it. I asked your assistant for your ring size. Under the pretext of a watch, I was supposedly buying you for your birthday. She was very discreet. Scarlett looked at him. Maya knew? She's been very professional about it. I'm going to have to give her a significant raise. Seems fair. They stood in the kitchen. The tea was unmade. Outside, February was dark and mild in the particular way of an Oregon winter that has decided not to be dramatic about itself. Logan looked at Scarlett, looking at the ring, and felt something so simple he almost didn't have a word for it. Not happiness, exactly, or not only that. More like the specific sensation of attention you've been carrying. For so long you stopped noticing it, releasing all at once. The full-body exhale of a man who has finally set down something heavy and can stand straight again. They called his mother first. She already knew about the ring, but not about the night, and she made a sound when Logan told her that was both undignified and deeply genuine, and then immediately asked if Haley knew, and Logan said not yet. And she said she'd keep Haley occupied until morning, and Logan said, thank you, and she said, don't thank me, just be happy, which was the most straightforward thing she'd ever said to him about his life. Scarlett called no one that night. She sat on the couch with Logan and looked at the ring in the lamplight and didn't feel the need to make it public or confirmed or witnessed. She had spent her adult life in front of people managing how things appeared, calibrating what information went where and in what form. She had learned, slowly and with Logan's particular help, that some things did not need an audience to be real. Some things were more real for being private. They told Haley in the morning. Logan drove to his mother's house and picked her up, and Haley came out still wearing her pajama top because she'd changed her pants but gotten distracted and got into the car with the comfortable disarray of a child whose morning is still happening. Logan didn't say anything on the drive home. He was aware of the effort this required. Scarlett was at the kitchen table when they came in. Haley said hi and dropped her overnight bag and opened the refrigerator to look for juice, which was her standard re-entry procedure. Hey, Logan said to Haley, come sit down for a second. Haley looked at him over the refrigerator door. She had a red on his voice that was accurate and almost unnerving. Is something wrong? No. Just come sit. She poured her juice and sat across from Scarlett. Looked between them. The assessment that was always happening was at full capacity. Scarlett and I are getting married, Logan said. Haley looked at Scarlett. At the ring, back at her father. When? She said. We haven't figured that out yet. A pause. Haley drank her juice. So she's going to be my stepmom? She's going to be... Logan glanced at Scarlett. What do you want her to be? Haley directed this at Scarlett directly. What do I call you? Scarlett held her gaze steadily. Whatever you want to call me, she said. There's no rule. You can keep calling me Scarlett. That's a real option. Haley thought about this with the seriousness it apparently deserved. My friend Danny has a stepmom, she said. She calls her by her first name. That works. Danny's stepmom brings her lunch sometimes when she forgets it. I could do that. You'd have to know what I like. I know what you like, Scarlett said. No pepperoni unless it's unavoidable. Extra cheese on Fridays. Nothing with onions you can see. But onions are fine if they're cooked down enough that you can pretend they're not there. Haley stared at her. How do you know that? I've been eating dinner with you for 8 months. Pause. Something moved in Haley's expression, not the assessment any longer. Something different. Something younger and more unguarded. I'm going to keep calling you Scarlett, she said. Good, Scarlett said. But you can bring my lunch, Haley said. Then, as if this had been a formal transaction and the terms had been settled, she picked up her juice and went to find Wallace. Logan looked at Scarlett. She looked back at him. She's going to be formidable, Scarlett said. She already is, he said. Has been for a while. They married in the backyard of the Craftsman house on a Saturday in late June, which was a reasonable weather bet in Oregon, and paid off a warm day with high clouds that diffused the light into something even and gentle, the kind of afternoon that doesn't demand to be noticed, and is therefore quietly beautiful. The leaning back fence had been repaired 2 weeks before the wedding. Because Logan had finally gotten around to it, which Scarlett had noted without comment because she understood that Logan did things on his own timeline and that the fence had been a background intention finally promoted to action by the occasion. 21 people. They had planned for 20, and Logan's uncle had called 3 days before asking if he could bring his wife, which he should have done earlier but hadn't. And Logan had said yes, because saying no to his uncle 3 days before a wedding was not the kind of conflict he had any interest in having. 21 was fine. 21 fit in the backyard with the folding chairs arranged in 4 short rows and wildflowers and mason jars on the fence posts and no other decoration, because Scarlett had vetoed the elaborate centerpieces the event coordinator had sent over, not because they were bad, but because they were wrong for this particular yard and this particular afternoon. Haley wore a yellow dress she had chosen herself after a negotiation process that took 3 weekends and involved 7 candidate dresses and final deliberation that she treated with the seriousness of a policy decision. She was also wearing her sneakers under the dress, because she had decided the suggested shoes were uncomfortable, and Logan had picked his battles, and this was not one of them. Carried both the flowers and the rings. This had been her suggestion. She had learned about the traditional roles from somewhere, probably a classmate with recently married parents, and had announced that she wanted both jobs. Logan had pointed out that flower girl and ring bearer were traditionally separate. Haley had said she didn't see why. He had not produced a satisfactory reason. The officiant was a woman named Patricia, who was a friend of Logan's mother, and who conducted the ceremony with the practical warmth of someone who has done this enough times to know that the formal parts matter less than the human parts, and who kept the formal parts brief. When Logan and Scarlett said their vows, they said the ones they had written themselves. Logan had written his over 3 weeks, in the evenings after Haley went to bed, on paper rather than a screen, because something about the permanence of paper felt right. He had not tried to be eloquent. He had tried to be true. He said, "I didn't know what I was looking for when you crossed the room. I wasn't looking for anything. I had stopped. And then you asked me to dance, and I said, yes, because I couldn't think of a reason not to. And that turned out to be the best decision I've made in my adult life. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I'm everything you deserve. I'm going to stand here and tell you that I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. That I will be the person who shows up, who pays attention, who tells you the truth even when it's uncomfortable, who makes room for what you need and asks you to make room for what I need and trusts that we can hold both. You gave me back something I'd stopped believing I had left. I am going to spend my life being grateful for that." Scarlett had not cried in the weeks of preparation. She was not by nature or training a person who cried in public or in advance of things. Cried now. Briefly, without drama, the way a person cries when they are surprised by the depth of their own feeling. She pressed her fingers to the corner of her eye, and Logan gave her a moment, and she took it, and then composed herself with the efficiency of a person who has limited patience even for their own emotions. She said, "I've built a lot of things. I'm good at building things. What I was not good at, what nobody had ever shown me, was how to stay. How to be somewhere without calculating the exit. You didn't make me stay. You just made me want to. And that is the more valuable thing, because nobody can make you want what you don't want. And the fact that I want this backyard, this house, this imperfect and completely specific life is not about you saving me or me saving you. It's about 2 people who are both lost inside their own lives, finding each other on a terrace in the dark, and deciding to keep paying attention. I will keep paying attention, for as long as you'll let me. My promise." Haley presented the rings with great solemnity and immediately afterward dropped Logan's into the grass, which landed in a small patch of clover and disappeared with the efficiency of an object that has decided to be difficult. The ceremony stopped. Several people got out of their folding chairs. Logan was on his hands and knees in the grass, his suit jacket spreading around him. His uncle was using his phone's flashlight. Patricia the officiant was standing with her hands clasped, patient, because she had seen variations of this before and understood that it would resolve. Scarlett crouched down beside Logan in her wedding dress and started looking through the clover methodically, section, with the calm focus of a person approaching a search problem rather than a crisis. "Left of the second chair," she said. "The clover's thicker there. Probably bounced. How do you know that?" "I'm looking at the trajectory. You're doing physics at your own wedding. I'm solving a problem at my own wedding. It's the same thing I do every day." A pause. There, she reached into the clover and retrieved the ring with 2 fingers, held it up. Found it. Logan took it, looked at her crouched in the grass in a wedding dress, holding a ring she'd just located through applied spatial reasoning, completely unruffled. I love you, he said. I know, she said. Put the ring on. He did. She held out her hand and he put her ring on, which had already been accomplished before the grass incident. And then they stood up, and Logan brushed the knees of his suit, and Scarlett smoothed her dress. And Patricia said, "Shall we continue?" And they said yes. When it was done, and they were married, Haley came forward without being asked and took Scarlett's hand on one side and Logan's on the other, which she did with the matter-of-fact naturalness of a child who has decided something and is acting on it without making a speech about it. She stood between them while people applauded, and Logan looked down at his daughter and felt the particular quality of a happiness that has been earned rather than granted, not the easy happiness of things going, but the harder and more durable happiness of having gone through the things that go wrong and arrived somewhere real on the other side. The reception was in the backyard and the living room when the evening cooled. Logan's mother had made food she had insisted, with the immovable certainty of a woman who expresses love through cooking and will not hear arguments, and the food was excellent. Scarlett's managing partner, Derek, had flown up from San Francisco and brought his wife, and spent most of the evening talking with Logan's uncle about fishing, which was not a topic Derek had any particular expertise in, but which he approached with the diplomatic engagement of a man who has sat across from difficult people in difficult negotiations and knows how to find common ground. Wallace circulated. Not with warmth. Wallace had not developed warmth. He had developed territorial familiarity, which in cat terms was more binding, but with the proprietary awareness of an animal who considers this space and these people to fall within his domain and is doing periodic inspections to confirm everything is in order. Haley stayed up until 10:30, which was negotiated up from 9 in recognition of the occasion. She spent a significant portion of the evening explaining to Logan's cousin's children, who were younger than her, that oarfish were not sea monsters, which was a position she maintained against significant skepticism from a 5-year-old who had seen a picture. When Haley finally went to sleep in her purple room, in her own bed, Wallace eventually conceding to join her in the absence of other demands on his time, the backyard had gone quiet. The last guests gone. The folding chairs stacked against the repaired fence. Logan stood at the kitchen sink, washing a glass that didn't need washing, because it was something to do with his hands in a moment that felt too large for ordinary activity. Scarlett came up behind him. She put her arms around him from behind and rested her chin on his shoulder the way she did sometimes, a gesture that had no agenda except presence. "Hey," he said. "Hey, good day, best day," she said. Simple, declarative, no performance in it. He pets at the glass down, turned around inside her arms so they were facing each other. She was still in her dress. He had lost the tie somewhere around 8 o'clock. The kitchen light was on its lowest setting. They'd never replaced the dimmer switch that Scarlett had mentioned in month 2, and Logan had forgotten, and she'd eventually stopped mentioning. Another thing on the list of household imperfections they had silently accepted as part of the house's character. "I want to tell you something," he said. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it." Then just say it. "When Haley was born, when everything fell apart and came back together in a different shape, I made a decision without knowing I was making it. I decided that was it. That my life had taken its shape, and the shape was, be a good father. Do the work. Don't ask for more than that. Don't want things that aren't realistic." He looked at her. I wasn't unhappy, but I had drawn a circle around myself and decided everything I needed was inside the circle, because everything outside it seemed too far away. "And now," she said, "now I don't have a circle." He paused. "That's the thing I wanted to tell you. You didn't break the circle or push through it. You just were so clearly outside it and so clearly worth going toward that I walked out of it without thinking about it. And then one day I looked back and it was gone, and I didn't miss it." Scarlett looked at him for a long moment. Quality of her attention was the thing he had loved first, before he'd even known he loved anything that she paid attention, the way most people didn't, fully, without the part of herself she'd kept back for the exit strategy. "Can I tell you something back?" she said. "Yeah. Came to that wedding because I'd said yes to the invitation 8 months earlier, and I was not going to cancel, because canceling felt like admitting something. I almost didn't stay. I walked in and thought 2 hours, give your regards, leave. That was the plan. What made you stay?" "I saw you," she said, "standing near the bar looking like you'd rather be anywhere else. And I thought that's an honest face. That's someone who's not here for what this room can give them." She paused. "I was so tired, Logan. I was so tired of rooms full of people who wanted something from me. You were the only person in the building who didn't know he was supposed to want something. I still don't want anything from you. Except this. I know," she said. "That's why this works. The 6 months that followed the wedding settled into the texture of a life rather than the texture of a story, which is to say that the significant moments were smaller, more distributed, embedded in the ordinary day, rather than arriving with the clear dramatic shape of a scene. Logan finished his degree in May, walked across a stage in Eugene while his mother made sounds, and Haley held a sign she'd made herself that said Dad finally did it in letters that started large and got progressively smaller as she ran out of poster board. Scarlett sat beside his mother and did not make sounds, but looked at Logan in the way she looked at him, when she was most proud and most quiet about it. He applied for the communications role at Meridian Strategies, one of Scarlett's portfolio companies, 3 weeks after finishing the degree. She disclosed the conflict of interest to the board and removed herself entirely from the process. He interviewed with 3 people, none of whom had met Scarlett, and answered their questions about his background and his resume gap and his reasons for finishing the degree at 32 with the honesty he had in him direct. Specific, nothing dressed up to be more impressive than it was. They called him back. They offered him the position. He took it. The work was not glamorous. It was entry-level because he was entry-level. That was the deal he'd made with himself, and the terms held. He wrote internal communications, drafted external materials under senior supervision, sat in meetings where he was the least experienced person in the room, and paid more attention than anyone because he understood what it meant to have gotten here and had no intention of treating it casually. He was good at it. Not immediately excellent good, with the trajectory of better. His supervisor, a woman named Carla, who was brisk and exacting and did not give as praise as a social gesture, told him at his 3-month review that he listened better than most of the people who'd been there longer. He called Scarlett after the review. She was in San Francisco for the week. She said, "I listen well," he told her. "You do," Scarlett said. "One of your better qualities. It comes from tech support. 8 years of figuring out what someone isn't saying." "Well, it translates." "It does," he said. And then, because it was true, and he didn't see a reason not to say it, "I like the work." "I know," she said. "I could hear it. Is that okay? That I'm telling you about my job?" "Logan, I've been telling you about my job since approximately our second phone call." "Yes, it's okay," he laughed. On the other end, he could hear her smile, not see it, but hear the shape of it in the quality of her silence. "I'll be home Thursday," she said. "We'll be here," he said. Haley turned 8 in October. Her birthday party was at the Eugene Natural History Museum, which had a wing dedicated to marine life, and which Haley had selected based on the presence of an oarfish exhibit she'd been lobbying to see for months. There were 7 children, 2 hours of exhibit walking, with a museum educator, who Haley questioned extensively, and who was visibly delighted by this, and cake afterward in the museum's community room. Cake was decorated with what the bakery had attempted as an oarfish, and which Haley had pronounced pretty good for someone who'd probably never seen a real one. Logan watched Haley move through her party with the particular pride of a parent who has watched a child be themselves, fully and without apology, in a room full of people, the confidence that had not been installed by performance or instruction, but had grown from being treated, consistently, like someone whose thoughts were worth hearing. Scarlett stood beside Logan and watched Haley correct the museum educator on the maximum recorded length of an oarfish. "She's going to run something someday," Scarlett said. "I know," Logan said. "I'm already trying to prepare myself." "Can't prepare yourself for that. I know that too." Scarlett put her hand in his. They stood there, watching Haley explain deep-sea biology to a group of 8-year-olds who were mostly following along and occasionally looking confused, and the afternoon had the quality that the best afternoons have, unremarkable in its elements and irreplaceable in its sum. The pregnancy arrived in February, 9 months after the wedding, on a Thursday morning, when Scarlett's period was 12 days late, and she had been telling herself for 12 days that she was late because she had been traveling and stress-affected cycles, and she was 31 and it was probably nothing. She took the test alone at 6 in the morning before Logan was awake. She sat on the edge of the bathtub for a while. Then she went out to the kitchen and stood there, and Logan came out at 6:30 in yesterday's t-shirt and found her standing at the counter, holding a small plastic object and looking at it with an expression he had not seen before in 11 months of living with her. He stopped in the doorway. "Scarlett," she looked up. The expression had things in it that were hard to name separately, not quite fear, not quite joy, something that was both of those things simultaneously and had not yet resolved into one. "I'm pregnant," she said. He crossed the kitchen. He didn't say anything yet, because he understood that the first thing needed was not words but presence, and he put his arms around her and held her, and she held him back, and they stood in the kitchen with the February dark still outside the window and the house quiet around them and the test on the counter. "Are you okay?" he said into her hair. "I don't know yet," she said. "Ask me in a few minutes." They stood there. The house made its small sounds. The heater came on with the low particular rumble it made when the morning was cold. After a while she said, "I didn't plan this. I know. My whole career has been planning. Every major decision planned. Modeled. Risk assessed." She exhaled against his shoulder. "I didn't plan this. Is that bad?" A pause, long enough that he waited. "No," she said finally. "No, I don't think it is." She pulled back enough to look at him. Her eyes were not dry. She was aware of this and did not seem to know what to do about it, which was unusual for her. "Are you—" "Yes," he said, before she finished the question. "Whatever you were about to ask." "Yes," she looked at him. The thing in her face moved through something and came out the other side into something steadier. "I'm terrified," she said. "Of what specifically?" "Of whether I know how to do this." "You know how to do this. You've done this. I don't." "You've been doing it," he said. "Haley, that's different. Haley had you already." Haley came with a person who knew what he was doing. "I didn't know what I was doing either. I figured it out while I was doing it." He held her gaze. "That's how everyone does it. There's no other way." She was quiet for a moment. "Then she's going to be insufferable about this." "Haley?" "She's been talking about being an older sister since the wedding." I assumed it was theoretical. It was theoretical. Now it's not. Scarlett looked at the test on the counter, then at Logan. Something had settled in her face, not the resolution of the fear, but the decision to move forward despite it, which she was better at than most people, because she had been making that particular decision her entire professional life and had simply never had to make it about something this personal. "Okay," she said. "Okay? I'm going to need you to not make a big thing of it for a while. Until I've processed, I can do that. And I'm going to need to tell Haley myself. When I'm ready. Also fine. And I might need to cry again later, without it being a thing." "Not a thing," he said. She nodded. Then she folded herself back into him, and he held her again in the February kitchen and thought about all the shapes a life can take that you never see coming, all the rooms you walk into without knowing what they contain, all the people who cross your path in the particular moment when you have stopped looking and are therefore finally capable of seeing. Scarlett told Haley on a Sunday. She sat with her on Haley's bed, under the purple walls, among the oarfish drawings and the library books and the accumulated evidence of a child who has strong opinions and a serious interior life, and she told her directly, without preamble, because that was how she did things, and Haley was someone who preferred directness. "You're going to be an older sister," Scarlett said. "I'm pregnant." Haley looked at her. The assessment ran. It was briefer than usual. "Is it a girl or a boy?" she said. "We don't know yet. When will you know?" "A few months." Haley absorbed this. "If it's a girl," she said carefully, "I get to help pick the name. That's negotiable. If it's a boy Dad picks, also negotiable." Haley appeared to consider the negotiating landscape. "I want to teach them about oarfish," she said. "They'll be lucky to have you for that." Haley looked at the ceiling, which was not purple. Logan had drawn the line at the ceiling and then back at Scarlett. "Are you scared?" Haley said. Scarlett looked at her. The directness of the question did not surprise her. This was Haley, who had once asked if Scarlett meant what she said, and had required an honest answer, and had received one and had filed it correctly. "Dad was probably scared when he had me," Haley said. This was not consolation, it was analysis. She was presenting a data point. "He was," Scarlett said. "He told me." Haley nodded as if this confirmed something. Then she reached out and took Scarlett's hand, not with the theatrical affection of a child making a gesture, but with the matter-of-fact warmth of one that has decided something and is expressing it in the simplest available way. "You figured out fractions," Haley said. "You'll figure out the baby." Scarlett looked at this child, this particular, formidable, entirely original child who had evaluated her in a gas station parking lot and decided she was acceptable based on her position on pizza toppings, and her ability to explain mathematics and her willingness to say true things and felt something so. Large and specific, she did not have a category for it. "Thank you," she said, simply and completely. "You're welcome," Haley said and went back to her book. Madeline Whitaker was born in October, healthy and loud, with her father's dark hair and her mother's expression of concentrated assessment that was so familiar. Logan laughed in the delivery room at the sight of it, which the nurses found either endearing or strange, possibly both. Haley was not in the room for the birth. She was with Logan's mother, who reported that Haley had been calm about the waiting in the manner of someone who considers composure a personal standard, and had spent the time revising an essay she was writing for school about bioluminescent organisms. When Logan brought Haley to the hospital room and she first saw her sister small, bundled, occupying Scarlett's arms with the blissful unconsciousness of a person who has not yet been asked to have opinions about anything. Haley stood at the edge of the bed and looked at her for a long time. "She's smaller than I expected," she said. "They're always smaller than you expect," Logan said. "Does she have a name?" "Madeline," Scarlett said. Madeline rose. Haley considered this. "That's good," she said, with the authority of someone who had made clear their stake in the naming process. Then she reached out one finger and touched her sister's hand, just the back of the hand, very gently. The way you touch something you're not sure yet how to hold. Madeline's fingers curled around Haley's without waking. Haley looked at that for a moment. Something moved in her face that was not the assessment, not the analysis, not the managing of her environment. Something younger, something that had not yet been organized. She didn't say anything. She just stood there with her finger in her sister's hand and let whatever it was move through her. Logan looked at Scarlett. Scarlett looked at Logan. Neither of them spoke. Years do not pass cleanly in a life that is actually lived inside them. They accumulate in layers, good stretches and difficult ones, small victories and the particular exhaustion of days that demand more than you had budgeted. Tuesday evenings and October birthdays and February mornings in kitchens where important things keep happening. Logan finished his first year at Meridian and was offered a role with more responsibility that he accepted without making a celebration of it, because it was the next thing, and the point had always been the next thing. Scarlett restructured the firm again. Derek handled more, she handled less. And the firm remained strong, because it had been built to be strong, not to require her constant intervention. She traveled less. She was home on Fridays. Friday pizza was still a rule. Haley grew up. This is the thing nobody warns you about when you have a child, not the difficult parts, which people warn you about extensively, but the specific quality of watching a child who was once 7 years old with a yellow raincoat and a package of cookies become 11, and then 14, and then a person who argues her positions with the precision of someone who has been practicing since before she could properly pronounce the names of deep-sea fish. She was formidable. She had always been formidable. The world was not ready for her, and she appeared to understand this and to find it invigorating rather than daunting. Madeline was different from her sister in the ways that siblings are different from each other, regardless of the same parents and the same house, quieter, more interior, more likely to sit with a thing for a long time before expressing a view on it. She had Scarlett's patience and Logan's warmth, and her own combination of both that was entirely her, which is how it works. Which is the part nobody can predict, and that makes it interesting. She grew up knowing that her family had been assembled in an unusual sequence, that Haley came first, that Logan had been a single father before he was a husband, that Scarlett had moved across the state to live in a house with a leaning fence and a difficult closet door. These things were not secrets or complications. They were the origin story. The way every family has one, not a clean founding myth, but the actual accumulation of decisions and chances and moments in which someone chose to keep going rather than to stop. There was a night when Madeline was 6 and Haley was 15, when Haley was doing homework at the kitchen table, and Madeline was asking her questions about it, as she often did, in the way of a younger sibling who regards an older one as the most immediately available source of information about the world. Haley was answering not with impatience, which she was capable of, but with the kind of patient attention she reserved for her sister that she did not always extend to adults. Logan stood in the kitchen doorway and watched them. Scarlett came up beside him. She was holding 2 mugs of tea, and she gave him one without asking, which was a thing she'd started doing years ago and had never stopped. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. They watched Haley explain something to Madeline. Logan couldn't hear the specific content, but caught enough to determine it was about fractions. He almost said something. Decided not to. "She learned that from you," he said to Scarlett. Scarlett looked at Haley. "The fractions?" The way she explains it. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. "She was 8 when I explained it to her. She remembers everything." "Yes," Scarlett said, "she does." They stood in the doorway with their tea and watched their daughters at the kitchen table. And outside it was whatever season it was, it didn't matter. All the seasons had happened by now. All the winters and springs, and the particular Oregon summers that were never quite as warm as you hoped, and therefore exactly warm enough. And the house was the house they had chosen for being imperfect and specific and right. And the closet door still came off its track if you opened it too fast. And the fence was still the fence. Repaired and re-leaning, because fences lean and that is the nature of fences. Logan had thought, once, standing near a bar at a wedding, that his life had taken its shape and the shape was fixed. He had drawn a circle and stood inside it and called it enough. He had been wrong not about the enough, but about the circle. The circle was not protection. It was subtraction. He had walked out of it without knowing he was doing it, toward a woman in a dark green dress who had looked at him and seen, somehow, the thing he'd stopped believing was visible. And she had crossed a crowded room and asked him to dance. And he had said yes, because he couldn't think of a reason not to. That was the whole of it, really. That was what the years came down to, all the accumulation of decisions and chances and ordinary Tuesday evenings that turned out to contain things you hadn't budgeted for. Two people who had each become invisible inside their own lives. One in the quiet of an apartment in Eugene where a man had stopped wanting things. One in the noise of a career in which a woman had stopped being seen, finding each other in the particular moment when the walls they'd built had thinned enough to see through. Nobody rescues anyone in a story like this. That is the thing worth knowing. Not Scarlett rescuing Logan from his small life. Not Logan rescuing Scarlett from her lonely one. Rescue is the wrong word for what actually happens between two people who are paying attention. What actually happens is simpler and less dramatic and more lasting. You see each other, clearly, without agenda. You see the person inside the function, the human inside the role. And you decide that what you see is worth moving toward. And then you move, and then you keep moving, together, into the ordinary and irreplaceable life that begins on the other side of every circle you ever convinced yourself was the whole world. In the kitchen, Haley drew a pizza on the corner of Madeline's notebook and divided it into fractions. And Madeline looked at it and nodded in the way of a child who has just understood something. And outside the fence leaned its particular lean, and the house held all of them, imperfect and warm and entirely enough.